0, -24, -44, and -76. Those are measurements of offset, and although the math is hard to understand, the difference they make when you put wheels on your truck is easy to see. So if you've ever asked, what is offset? We're gonna show you. Banger's bringing his hoopty in here with his clapped out exhaust. I might have to give him 5 seconds here. What a rig, what a unit. What a unit. See, I told you. So starting on the low end of things here, this is a 9 wide, and this has a +1 offset. So again, if you're looking at something that has a 0 offset, it's essentially gonna be the same thing, off by 1 millimeter. The purpose that it serves for this video is the same. So 20 by 9, meaning that the diameter of the wheel is 20 inches, 9 being that the width of the wheel is 9 inches, +1 being that offset, so it's just slightly 1 millimeter off center of that wheel. Tire on here is a 35 by 12.5 wide, and as you can see on the Ford here, Ford has a pretty high positive offset from factory on their stock wheels, +44, so they're really sucked in there. So the 0 or +1 on here gets us just outside flush. If I tried to look down the fender and measure this, an inch, maybe, it's like just outside flush. So that's what your 9 wide 0 or +1 looks like on the F-150. All right, so now in comparison, this is the 9 wide +1 on the Denali. And now the Denali actually has, I shouldn't say the Denali, it's really any GM truck. The factory wheels have a lower positive offset, +28 is what comes on here. So you would think a lower number means further out, right? The higher the number is positive, the more it's getting pushed into the wheel well opening. The lower the number is, including negative, that pushes it further out. But because this is a different bodied truck with different suspension components, it doesn't quite work like that, all right? Stay with me here. So still the same 35-inch tall tire, 12.5 inches wide. Wheel is still a 20, and we're still 9 inches wide, still that same +1 offset, very similar to a 0 offset. But when you look at how much this sticks out on the GM trucks, it's actually a little less than what you'd see on the Fords. So there really isn't even much to measure here. I would say that the tire comes out maybe to that 1.5 inch mark, because there's a little bit of bulge, because again, 12.5 inch wide tire and 9 inch wide wheel. But the rim of the wheel is actually essentially in line with the fender. So this is a very flush looking setup in comparison to the Ford. So then on the F-150, this is the 20 by 10. Now, keep in mind, the diameter here doesn't really matter. This could be an 18 by 10, a 20 by 10, a 22 by 10. The fitment, as far as how far this sticks out, what the stance is, isn't gonna change here. So, like I said, 20 by 10, -24 offset. So we're talking 20 inches tall, 10 inches wide, 35-inch tire by 12.5 inches wide. When we look at how far this sticks out from the factory fender here, talking about 3.5 inches or so, including the bulge of the actual tire, because the tire is wider than the wheel. So the wheel is sucked in probably, I don't know, maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch. But overall, the appearance here is that it sticks out that 3.5, 4 inches. So that's your 10 wide and -24 on the Fords. All right, so 20 by 10 -24s on the GM truck here. So you can see that these stick out a little bit more, obviously, than the 9 wides, but not a ton. I think 10 wide is actually a really nice setup on these, good aggressive stance. 35s are a bit big on a level truck, right? But you could maybe, now, I was gonna say you could maybe do 33s, but even that might be a stretch unless you do a little bit of trimming. But anywho, back to the fitment stuff. So sticking out, we're talking about 3.5 or so inches from your factory fender here. So decent amount of stance, but nothing too crazy that's gonna be too annoying or fling rocks down the side. So I think a 10 wide is a good setup on me. All right, so now we got the 20 by 12s on the F-150. So again, 20-inch diameter, 12 inches wide. It's a 35 by 12.5 tire. We've heard this a million times already. As we're getting more and more negative with the offset and wider the wheels, we're sticking out further. So now if we go up and measure to the outside of the tire, you're talking probably 5 inches or so. And this is pretty flush setup because 12.5 inch wide tire on a 12-inch wide wheel, so it's very squared off on the sidewall, but sticking out about that 5.5 inches from your factory fenders. Okay, now looking at the 12 wide on the Denali here. So again, this is a 20-inch wheel, 12 inches wide. That's the depth. I feel like I'm gonna say this a million times, but hey, you know, whatever works. This is a -44 offset, so that's your standard offset on a 12 wide. You can see that it still sticks out from outside the fender, but it's not quite as aggressive as, you know, you jump a 14 wide or something like that, but more aggressive than our 9 wides. So from the fender, I'm gonna call it 4.5, 5 inches or so. Now that we have a 12-inch wide wheel and a 12.5-inch wide tire, the sidewall is essentially straight up and down. There's technically a little bit of a bulge here, but not much. The tire and wheel is very square, and then it sticks out from your fender. So that's going to be your 12 wide, negative 44 on the GM trucks. All right, big behemoths on the F-150. These are the 14 wide. So again, these are 24 tall, 14 wide. That's the depth here. And this is a negative 75 offset. So essentially what we're looking at sticking out on the F-150 is probably 7.5 inches. So that's a lot of wheel and tire outside of here. Typically, obviously, you're not gonna run this on a leveling kit. It would be impossible to turn. You can do it, we did drive it here. But normally you're gonna have a much taller lift to run this wheel and tire setup. But you can see the negative 75 or negative 76 sticks out significantly on these trucks. Okay, so then on the GM, this is the 24 by 14. So again, 24 is the diameter of the wheel. 14, it's kind of gonna feel like the depth here. It's the width of the wheel. That's that measurement. 35-inch tall tire by 12.5 inches wide, same as everything else here. So when we talk about offset on this, this is a negative 75. It's essentially, negative 76 is what's more common on a 14 wide. It's only 1 millimeter difference, not something you're really gonna see. So on the GM, it sticks out about 7 inches or so to the outside edge of the rim of the wheel. So it looks a little bit rolled in just because this tire is stretched, because the tire is only 12.5 inches wide, even though the wheel is 14 inches wide. So if you ran like a 1350 or 1550 on here, had a more square setup, you'd have that tire going all the way out 7.5 inches outside of the fender. Okay, so again, just a recap here, we have the 9 wide positive 1 on the Ford, the 10 wide negative 24, 12 wide negative 44, and 14 wide negative 75. And then over on the GMC, same thing here, 9 wide positive 1, 10 wide negative 24, 12 wide negative 44, and 14 wide negative 75. So that's it. That's all the different offset that you can see. If you guys have questions, you can drop them down in the comments below. Otherwise, check out the website. You can find all your wheel tire suspension needs, customoffsets.com. Peace.